If you could please take your seats. Well, I'd like to welcome you this morning on behalf of the Neelson family for this occasion to celebrate Bill Neelson, truly one of a kind men and individuals in our world. My name is Colin Spencer, and I've been honored by the family and asked by the Neelson family to MC the program this morning, and it truly is an honor. One little housekeeping rule: no, it's not about smoking, it's about your cell phones. Guaranteed somebody has a cell phone with the ringer still turned on. And from past experiences, turn it off. A little embarrassing. So that's about it. So like I said, we're here today to celebrate the life of Bill Neelson. And on behalf of the family, I'd like to thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here in person and online. It is a video feed online as well. So just be aware of that. So without any further ado, let's get this sale started. I'd like to call up Bill's son, Brian, to give a eulogy. Brian?
Thank you all for coming. I tell you, so many memories for me with all the people and everything like that. So I'm going to start with a special welcome to my mom, Ruby Nilsson, and my sister, Sharon, and her husband, Steve. They are watching on DLMS from Ruby's senior care home in Calgary. My mother was Bill's partner for this journey, and we are sorry that her physical condition wouldn't allow her to travel up, but we are glad she can watch the celebration and see some of her life story in this. Thor William Bill Nilsson. Bill was born in Edmonton, Alberta in May 21st, 1933. And in June, his mother, Daisy, traveled by bus with her newborn son, Bill, from Edmonton to Westlock, where a neighbor picked them up and took them to meet Bill's father, Thor Henning Tom Nilsson, in Freedom, Alberta, at their new homestead. Months earlier, in November of 1932, Tom had started construction of their first home, a log house. Later, this home was replaced with a large two-story home which was built with no plans. Daisy just told the person building it what she wanted it and how it was going to be built. This house still stands to this day. Bill went to Pembina Heights School, but was always eager to work on the farm. Tom told the story of his neighbor stopping to tell him that the tractor was going down the field by itself. Tom explained that Bill was too small to sit on the seat and touch the pedals, so he stood by the pedals, driving the tractor, but it was one of those tractors with big old fenders and you couldn't see him. And he was out there working. Bill quit school in grade 8 to help run the farm. Tom would leave the farm to go buy cattle and horses. Dad said when he would hear Tom bringing them home, it was his job to run out to the road and steer him into the yard. And he said one of the memories he had was when it was like 30 below. He said 2 miles away, you could hear him coming down the road and the cattle's hooves squeaking on the road. That sound it makes when it's real cold. And he told me many times, he said, I could tell he was coming because I could hear him. Later, when Bill was about 20 years old, he bought a fancy glass roof, white-walled tired car so he could go to dances in Barrhead, Linaria, and Westlock. One time when Bill and his friend Garth Roberts were going to Westlock, they had to stop and wait for a car to cross the one-lane bridge. In the car was Ruby Hendel and her father, AJ, who was bringing her home from Edmonton, where she stayed with her older brother, Grant, so she could work as a telephone operator. Bill watched the car cross the bridge and told Garth that he was going to marry that pretty girl in that car. On the 13th day of April 1955, Bill married that pretty girl. They went on a honeymoon to BC with their lifelong friends, Wes and Aileen Spencer. I never understood that part, but anyways. Bill and Ruby moved to a farm in Lanaria in May of 1955. 3 children were born in Lanaria: Brian, Lee, and Kenneth. In August of 1960, Bill and Ruby moved to a farm at Clyde Corner. 2 children were born there, David and Sharon. He sold cattle at the farm, as well as finished cattle to take to Edmonton to the packing plants and to the stockyards. He converted an old egg sorting shack into his first office. He would have an office for Nilsson livestock for the rest of his life. One person he hired to help on the farm was Melvin Nile, who would remain a lifelong friend. On the Saturday before he had his stroke and went to the hospital on Thursday, we had gone to Trenchuk Farms at Smoky Lake and then on to Melvin's farm, which his son Brian now owns, and visited in the shop. He loved that. He just visiting with people was my dad. When Bill and Ruby sold the feedlot to Don Lawton, they moved in 1965 to Winterburn, where Bill was partners with Cliff Smool in S&N Holdings. They had an office in the Sands Hotel by the Edmonton Stockyards. They bought and sold farms, machinery, cattle. Dad said they liked to buy them lock, stock, and barreled, Brian, where the people, they took their clothes and left. They just bought everything. In August of 1969, Bill and Ruby moved to Grand Prairie, where Bill partnered with Art Noonan in a trucking company called Double N Transport. Art would run the trucks, and Bill bought cattle to ship to the Edmonton Stockyards to try and keep the trucks busy. Bill would sell his half interest to Pete Gabori in 1971. Then Bill bought the farm and feedlot at Clyde back. Bill ran the feedlot and Ruby did the books. He fed and bought and sold cattle for the feedlot. In the early 1970s was when Bill bought his first load of bison calves from South Dakota. He had buffalo for all his time in Clyde. They were one of his favorite animals. It was in Clyde in 1976 that Bill, Lee, and Brian built Modern Livestock on the old drive-in site where today the market sits. It was a lifelong dream of Bill's to have an auction mart. I think because he didn't want to pay commission to the stockyards. They opened the auction mart in March of in March of 1977. The first year we hoped that we could sell 20,000 cattle, but we sold 45,000. It continued to expand, but disaster struck in November of 1982 when it burned to the ground. Even though it was the fall run, no cattle were lost because the auction crew that chased cattle to the feed pens in the back and the bravery of Marty Gilfillan, who ran into the burning building to chase cattle out. Lee and I were there looking at the wreckage where it all burned down and the pens and stuff, and Dad pulls up and he says, "What are you doing? Get going. We have customers that need us. We had to find a way to sell cattle, and I will rebuild the auction mart." 2 weeks later, we built a 20 by 30 plastic shed next to the gatehouse. We put a portable scale in front of it that hooked onto the remaining pens. We used straw bales to sit on for the few customers that came to watch, Leonard to sleep in, and the buyers would get the number of cattle from Lee and the weight. They would call out their prices, until someone with the highest, and Lee would say, sold. In the winter, we pulled a Herman Nilsson out in front to kind of keep it warm in some fashion. The year we burned down, we had sold 100,000 cattle that year. That year in the plastic building, we sold 80,000. Bill hired a contractor to build a new market. And just like his mother Daisy, he had no plans. He just told the contractor what he wanted it to look like as they built. We were operating by September, had a grand opening on October 1st, 1983, less than a year later. This was a great lesson our dad taught us about not quitting when faced with adversity. Keep going. This was a trait that my dad showed many times in his life. Modern livestock grew fast. Dad had taught us to treat the cattle like they were own and look after the customers. In 1986, Lee and Brian were able to buy Bill's share in the auction mart. Bill and Ruby moved to Winterburn, again with Bill's office for Nilsson Livestock in Edmonton. 1983 saw Bill and Ruby move to Windy Ridge Stables in Cochrane, which Bill had received on a trade. He sold Windy Ridge in the year 2000. They moved to Chestermere and then Calgary. In 2004, Bill and Ruby moved to Edmonton, first to the Lamarchand condo, and then to a house in Lewis Estates, until 2018, then to St. Albert in the Citadel Mews West. This was his last move until his passing. Wynn and I were looking for a senior care home in St. Albert in case he had to move out of his condo. The lady showing us was very nice, telling us all about the features of the complex. She said they had jobs for the residents to keep them active. She asked what kind of job Bill would like. I said, unless they had a job called boss, it would not work. One of his favorite things to do when he was not in the office was go out on Saturdays with me to check cattle. In 2012, we went on a trip to South Peace Ranches, north of Dawson Creek, our ranch there. On the way up, Dad asked if we could stop at the motel in High Prairie. We stopped at the motel. Dad walked into the office. He came out 30 minutes later. I asked what we had stopped for. He said he had just bought the motel. To some people, this would seem strange, but to me, this was just a road trip with my dad. Dad and I looked at many things over the years that he was buying and selling. But then Dad would look at farms and ranches that Nilray Farms, the farm company that Lee and I have, were dealing on. So I guess the apple did not fall far from the tree. Dad enjoyed horses, and he was always trying to find a horse for his grandchildren. In later years, he enjoyed going to the stables by St. Albert to watch Candace, then Ginger and Stephanie ride and jump at different times. Our father taught us many lessons in life by things he would do. We also learned things not to do by watching him. The very hard part of his life was the last 2 years as his Alzheimer's slowly progressed. He knew he could not do deals anymore. Many times on Saturday, he would say, this was the worst part about getting old. Bill passed on February 20th at the Sturgeon Community Hospital. He lived an interesting life, and I will miss him. And if I could have Daisy Nilsson come up, she's going to talk to you as a granddaughter, as one of the grandkids.
Hello and good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Daisy Nilsson. I've had the blessing of having Bill as my grandpa. I'm especially grateful for the past 2 years, during which I've had the privilege of being with Grandpa every day. Our days were filled with storytelling, jokes, and sitting on his patio enjoying the sunshine while he gave me business advice he thought I should pursue immediately. One of my favorite things about Grandpa was the way he would greet me every time I had visited him. With a big smile on his face and joy in his voice, he'd say hello as if we hadn't seen each other in forever. He'd even sometimes do a little dance or make up a funny song to sing to me as I walked in. He was so excited to see me, although I had seen him just the day before, or sometimes even earlier that day. Despite seeing each other so often, we never ran out of things to talk about. Grandpa was always full of stories, whether it was the story of how he met Grandma, stories of time spent with family and friends, growing up on the farm, or of course, his favorite of all, how he quit school in grade 8. My time with Grandpa never had a dull moment. A memory I have from when I was just a little girl that I think all the grandkids can relate to would be going over to Grandma and Grandpa's, and anytime they could, they would sneak us ice cream when Mom and Dad weren't looking. Although you may think that only happens when you're kids, Grandpa kept that spark alive forever. Every dinner I had with him always ended the same way. Grandpa would insist on us having dessert, as if it were the most important part of the evening. Even as I grew older, those moments with Grandpa never lost their magic. It wasn't about the ice cream or the treats. It was about the love, the stories, and the feeling that no matter how much time passed, those special traditions would always be a part of us. Looking back, I realized that it was his way of making us feel special and showing us that life's little joys are worth cherishing. Those memories with Grandpa will stay with me forever, reminding me that it's the simple moments that truly make life sweet. Grandpa was a family man and businessman through and through. He led by example, showing us what dedication and strong work ethic can help you accomplish. He was a pillar to this family. He left behind a legacy that will never be forgotten. The memories we made and the love he gave will stay with me forever. I'm beyond grateful for the time we shared. In closing, theologian Albert Schweitzer once said, "When we lose someone we love, we must not learn to live without them, but to live with the love they left behind." Thank you.
Thanks, Daisy. I think I know where your confidence from. We have one more storyteller, then we're going to have a few other folks say some few words, but there's some people sitting in the middle here that just all dropped their heads because we're not sure what's going to come out of this next fellow's mouth. But Brian, we might find out the thing about the honeymoon. You never know. I don't know. Next, I'd like to call up Bill's lifelong friend, my older brother, Wes. Keep her clean. Yeah.
Well, that's one part that's changed. I can remember when I just used to run up them things. Probably you've noticed that I've changed my way of transportation too. Good morning, family, friends, and you too, Kenny. How you doing, buddy? Good. When he mentioned that Bill quit school in grade 8, I done the same thing. And the reason we quit is because the mirrors in the washroom were too low, we couldn't see to shave. Can you hear me in the back? Just wanted to check. I was at a government deal the other day, and the speaker was speaking, and some guy at the back hollered out, "I can't hear you." The guy up at the front stood up, said, "I can hear him, and I'll trade you places." Brian mentioned Ruby, and God bless you, Ruby. We're thinking about you, dear. And my wife is in extended care here, and they were great partners, them girls. When we left on their honeymoon, Aileen and Ruby got in the back seat of that nice blue car with the glass roof with AMA road maps, because there were no GPSs in them days, of course. And that's where they spent the 2 weeks, was in the back of that car, telling Bill and I where to go and what to do. We generally went where we were told where to go, but not necessarily done what we were told to do. But they were great friends, and we had a great time. Well, Bill was farming, so he couldn't go on a honeymoon, so they waited about 3 months and needed somebody with experience to go along with them. Aileen and I, we were married in '51, so we loaded up with that nice little car, tent, sleeping bags, and air mattresses. Well, that worked good. We got down into Montana, and we were cutting across over to Utah, and I don't know what happened. We'd spent a little time in the bar, I guess, and I didn't know Ruby and Aileen to drink, but they must have been drinking too, because we pitched the tent, and the next morning, the water was running through the tent. Well, we pitched it where there was an artesian well, and we were pitched it right where the water. So we spent all next day with it in a park drying out. But you talk about Papa Bill, you know, I probably shouldn't say this out of school, but if you maybe are afraid of what I'm going to say, you better cover your ears. But, you know, we'd go to bed at night in that tent in them sleeping bags, 9 by 12 tent. And of course, my wife would say, "Go to sleep, you old fool, you've been married for 4 years, you know." Well, Bill is probably, or was probably, the only man in the world that could make an air mattress squeak. We ended up in Victoria, and we were a little better educated by this time. We got into a tent ground there. It was legitimate, and we were camped right along the bank, and we went out to Souk, where a girl that lived in Souk had went to school with Aileen and Bill. Oh, yeah, my wife and Bill were raised across the fence from one another. And that's how I got hooked up with Bill. Anyway, didn't get hooked up with Bill, got hooked up with my wife, I mean. It just so, when I first met Bill, he said, "Well, come on out Saturday and you can help Dad and I thrash." Well, that was the first education for him, pitching bundles. Then him and Garth Roberts took me fishing with a flashlight, a pitchfork, and a .22. We, went down into the bush there south of Barhead, and the deal is, of course, most of you guys probably done it. You shoot in the water, the fish flip over, and you flip them over with a pitchfork onto the ground, pick them up, and so on. So, but anyway, back at Souk, we got into the sauce there a little. Bill did, because I was staying sober, because I'd done most of the driving. Because with that glass roof, Bill was going through the mountain looking for mountain goats and cows. And so we got back into the campgrounds about 3 in the morning and pulled in there. The girls got out and they went in the tent. Bill got out and decided he had to go to the bathroom. Well, that's fine. In them days. So anyway, he's going to pee up against this bank, which that's okay too. But then he wanted to write his name. And that part worked okay too, till he wanted to dot the I. Well, by this time you can see curtains and holiday trailers and other tents there, people kind of sticking their head. So he weighed about 180 pounds, I weighed 130. So I got him steered toward the tent, and he tripped over the flap and fell, and when he fell, I fell on top of him, And of course, the girls were laughing, and I started laughing, and then he started hollering at me for laughing at him, you know. But, you know, it was fun. After that, we spent quite a bit of time traveling. Phoenix and Arizona, a couple of trips to Mexico, a couple of cruises, and so on and so forth. And I took him with me on a trip north one winter, and we left Keg River Cabins to go into Rainbow Lake, and she was 70 below. And the battery in the car froze up, and I had candles in the glove compartment to, you know, because it wasn't my first trip. And I get these candles out, and Bill says, "Holy shit," he said, "we're freezing to death. Now we're going to have a birthday party," he said. So we went Rainbow Lake, Zama, and then across Zama Lake on the ice road up to Hay River, stayed in the motel. It was froze up in the morning. Went out to Pine Point, and then back. Well, Bill didn't want to take any more of them trips. But it was a great time, like I say. You know, you'd walk into his office, and goddamn thing, you know. About 4 months before Bill passed here, I went into his office, and he said, "Boy, I got a new hearing aid," he said. I said, "Oh, yeah." He said, "It cost me $20,000, but she's a goddamn good one." And I said, "Oh, is that right, Bill? What kind is it?" 10 to 2. But he said the other day, I went to the hearing doctor, and I went in and sat down, and she said, "What's the suppository doing in your ear, Bill?" Well, he said, "I don't know, but now I know where my hearing aid is." No. And the thing is that if there is such thing as you're supposed to get paid back for things that you've done wrong, there's no way that our wives should be suffering. That's been reversed. They're the ones that should be out and about here, and I guess if anybody should be getting paid back is Bill and I, you know, because we talk about dementia, Alzheimer's, a few things like that. I can remember 70 years ago when I couldn't remember where I lived sometimes, so I guess I had a little dementia then. I don't know. So anyway, boy, I'll tell you, Bill would be pretty proud to see this show here, and it's great, and I'm glad to be part of it. And you guys, and Sharon, Ruby, take care, and we'll talk to you. We didn't get streaming into my wife's place because we couldn't afford it, and I didn't have a chance to take up a collection. But, you know, if Bill had still been, well, that was another thing. Have we got a little time, Brian? I said to Brian the other day, "How long can I talk?" He said, "No, it doesn't matter." He said, "I kind of know the people that own the building." So he so he said, "Go ahead." So anyway, now I forget what the hell. Oh, yeah, Bill and I, we had a company. We had an apartment block in Fox Creek and some land up at Athabasca and so on. But it seemed like anything I touched went flat, you know. But it was a lot of fun while you were laying awake at night wondering what the hell was going to happen. And I don't know how Bill ever was able to sleep or walk around with his problems. But I know if he was around, he'd say, "Wes, while you're up there, just mention if there happens to be anybody in the crowd that still owes me a little money, you could bring it up and give it to you, and Kathy will send them a receipt tomorrow." So if there's any change around and anybody's starting to feel a little guilty, then you know, I've got an empty pocket here. So anyway, well, I better shut up. Colin's starting to snarl at me. Talk to you all later. Thank you.
Well, that wasn't too bad. He's not kidding about the collection. He'll be sitting over in the corner, sitting on his walker, looking like Warren Kelly Sutherland's cowboy hat, and he'll have it out there. Next, apparently there's a few folks that want to get up and say a few things, tell a few stories. That's okay, Brian? That's the right time. So don't be shy. Come on up. There we go. Come on up, Glenn. Well, Glenn's on his way up. I've got a little one that I've been family friends with the Nielsons since the day I was put on this earth about 39, 40 years ago, give or take. And we were in Maui 8 or 9 years ago. My wife Lori and Tracy, or my sister Faye, and mom and dad and Bill and Ruby and Sharon was there, Sis, as I called her. And I mentioned Sis the other day, and I think Lee said, Jesus, I haven't heard that for a long time. But that's what we called her back then. And Bill and mom really had a great friendship. They had their own language for sure, because we were sitting there playing crib one day, and I'd only had 1 or 2 beers, so I was, fairly good. And me and Lori were playing against, or me and Dad, I don't know, but we're playing against Bill and Mom. Well, they kicked our ass, and they were talking to each other, and I don't know what language they're in, but Faye's got a video. I just had to piss myself laughing. I could not play crib because they were talking, and I don't know what it was, but anyway. Glenn, come on up.
I'm not sure. Oh, there we go. Anyway, I'm Glenn Fix. I'm honored to speak here at Bill's memorial. I knew Bill from way back when I was a child. My dad and him were friends, and we used to stop at the auction mart and when he had the little office in the yard there at Clyde and visit. And anyway, it sort of went. So I kind of knew him for most of my life. Anyway, so about 25 years ago, I was still out on the farm. I grew up in Rochester, and I had kind of stopped to see Bill once in a while. And I was doing business in town here, and I decided I'd like to set up an office, just some real estate stuff. So I went over to see Bill, and I told him what I was doing. He says, go upstairs and pick one. So from there, I was there. We were together every day for really about the last 25 years over time. So I stopped there, and we got all set up. Most of the time was spent down in his office, talking deals, watching cattle sales on the computer, and lunch every day. We'd go out and spend some time. So he'd help me with my deals, and I would help him with all the property him and Ruby owned. I would take care of the properties and make sure the yards were taken care of and the houses were running properly. And anyway, we even teamed up on a couple deals together. So from there, we enjoyed each other's company every day. Many road trips, we'd go out and look at the properties and ones he wanted to buy or whatever. And so it was. So at the end of each day, he would say to me, okay, that's your lesson for the day at the Neelson University. I'll see you tomorrow. Well, I won't see you tomorrow, old buddy, but I'll never forget you or our friendship and the things we did. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. Is there anybody else who would like to come up and share a story or two? As you're on your way up, Bill told me the one time that he used to own a trailer park in Boyle, Alberta. And he says, Colin, this trailer park, it's not a bad business, but it's just not a good one. He says, but I found a Polish guy, and I sold it to him. And he says, that guy, I'll tell you what, he's not so smart, but it's okay. His money was good. So, Polish guy, would you like to come and say a few words about Bill? I don't know. Nobody else is getting up. I told you one day I'd get back at you for something, and here it is. Ron Victor's got a few words to say, whether he knows it or not. Oh, you'll know. He's got a few words to say. We know that, but this probably is a mistake of mine, but
How come you pick on me so much? Wes, first of all, I'm going to pre-book you now. I want you to do my eulogy at my funeral. And I guess the first thing, I wish I would have known Bill probably 30, 40 years ago personally. Probably knew him about the last 10 or 12. I'm not sure if he's a good salesman or he's just very passionate about things, but I'm assuming I'm a pretty diehard loving type of guy, so it must have been passion. He tricked me into boil, so I went in there, I don't know, a couple years ago. He says, "You interested in buying it back?" And he says, "Who are you and what are you talking about?" All of a sudden. He didn't want nothing to do with that problem. I think I'm going to write a book one day. I'm going to have a chapter on Bill. It's going to be on some of my problem tenants, but I'm going to have him as one of them. And but I'm going to say that the one thing with the Neelson family, I think the Neelson name, you got something in common with Donald Trump. That is, can you guess? I would say name recognition. I think Nilsson's like, we used to have live out at Mayerthorpe, and my dad and they did cattle. I had some cattle. I took mine to the Edmonton Stockyard, sorry. And but everyone knows the Neelson name across Alberta, Western Canada probably, so he's done good. I know he advertised in the Western Investor lots, and Glenn, nice to see you again. I'm going to see Vids. You beat cancer, and you're still kicking around. That's good. But otherwise, no, he was a great guy. I wish I would have known him a little bit longer, or earlier. So great family, all you guys. David, like golfing with you. I haven't golfed with you in the last couple of years because I'm sick and tired of your cheating. But oh no, yeah, well, I don't know how you can cheat that much. Anyways, okay, Colin, get someone else up here.
Thanks, Ronald. Is there anybody else that would like to come up and say a few words? Thank you, sir. The fellow coming from the back there. You can say nice and bad, Bill. Doesn't matter. Just whatever you want. There's no bouncers.
Just trying to think something nice after listening to Wes. The Bill Nilsson brought me from Winnipeg in 1978. So it'd be just over 40 years ago, maybe even longer. He hired me to look after the office at the auction mart. So Annette and the kids and the dogs, we hopped in our little car and we came out to, and we settled in Westlock. We bought a little house. And after we settled, Bill gave me a call.
It's okay.
Bill gave me, this is my daughter. What is your name? That's my daughter, Nicola. And anyway, what had happened, Bill gave us a call and said, or actually didn't give us a call, he came up to me and said, "This Sunday, you're coming out to meet us. You're coming out to have dinner with us." And I said, "Yeah, okay." And that night, "No, you bring the family." So we came out, and when we came out, their families, Nicola, who's a little bit older now, 65, 70, and Simon, and who at that time 4 or 5 years old, something like that, maybe. Yeah, I think I'd be correct on that. We came into the house, and I introduced Annette to Ruby and Bill, and then I turned around to introduce the kids. The kids are gone. And I thought, what the heck? And what had happened is Bill took him off to the side, and Bill's a big guy, and I couldn't see him. He had knelt down, and he was talking to Nicola and Cy, and and I think it was Nick, but she said, "What do we call you?" Bill's never short for words, and as you know, and he said, Buffalo Bill. And he said, don't worry about that. He said, I like ice cream. And so he said, come over to the fridge. So he took him over to the fridge, and he had, I don't know, boxes of ice cream. I don't know how much there were. But he said, pick out whatever you wanted. And next thing we know, Nick and Cy and Buffalo Bill were sitting at the kitchen table eating ice cream. So Ruby, Annette, and I went into the living room and got to know each other. Ruby's the classiest gal I know. Anyway, just a very nice day. We thanked them and went home. And Simon went to school the next day. And he came home, and he was upset. And Annette says, "Si, what's the matter?" And he said, "The teacher's calling me a liar." And she said, "A liar?" "Yeah, she's calling me a liar." And she said, "Well, what happened?" And he said, "The teacher asked any of us to stand up and talk about what happened on the weekend." He said, "I stood up and I said, I know Buffalo Bill." And she said, "Simon, there's no such thing as a Buffalo Bill." And he said, "Yes, there is. And he lives around here." And at that point, she said, "No, he doesn't live around here. There is no Buffalo Bill." And go sit down. So, Mom, she's calling me a liar. And Annette says, no big, she said, "We'll get this sorted. You and I will go down and talk to the teacher." And they went down, got it all settled. And the big thing about it was when he told her where Buffalo Bill lived around here, he turned around and said, "Yes, he does. He lives at Clyde Corner." And the biggest thing about that is every day for the next 4 or 5 years, every time we went past Clyde Corner, Cy would jump out in the back seat and he would say, "Buffalo Bill lives here, Clyde Corner."
Thanks, Bill. We've got time for one or two more if anybody wants to come up and share a little bit. What? Okay. Now we're going to have Eving at the Improv and walk around with a mic. Okay, sure.
Thank you, Colin. If you'd have seen him a couple of days ago with his black eyes, you'd have thought that I'd beat him. But I'd forgot to tell you, when I was at the service station in Clyde in '59, Bill stopped one day and he said, "I've got a bit of a problem." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, Jarvis are having a big cattle sale there tomorrow, and there's a farm sale east of town here. It's got some cattle on it," and he said, "I can't cover them both. Would you go to the farm sale and buy them cattle out there?" Well, I said, "Sure." So I went out and I bought them all. The next day, Bill went and picked them up, and when he got them loaded, he stopped at the corner for a coffee, but it wasn't really coffee he had in his mind. He said, "What in the hell are you doing?" I said, "Why, Bill?" Well, he said, "Geez," he said, "did you look at them cattle?" I said, "Well, yeah, I see them there. The auctioneer was selling them." Well, he said, "There's one that's only got one eye, and the other one's got a bad leg, and one's got mastitis." And he said, "And the goddamn price you paid for them." And I said, "Well, really, Bill, I thought, at that time I didn't know anything about auction sales. I said, I thought when the bidding quit, that's when you hit her again, because then it's got to be a good deal." And he said, "Yeah, it is." Well, I said, "Well, what's your concern?" Well, he said, "I could lose my butt on these things." I said, "No, Bill, you should get top dollar. I paid top price." But I found out then that that's not how it worked.
Thanks. Mel, how are you? If you want to stay here, you can stay here. If you want to go up, you can go up.
I'll go up there.
Okay.
Get away from these guys.
I've been with these guys for a long time. Well, my name is Melvin Nile. We have the feedlot and the farm right across from the auction mart. And we go back a long time with Bill. I was working at the feedlot there when Bill and the family moved down from Grand Prairie. And that's the first time I'd met them and the boys and Sharon and the family. One of the first things I said to Bill, this is 1970 now, Brian and Lee, well, none of them have a driver's license yet. They're that young. But they are in business with Dad, and that's another story how this come about, and I'll leave that one. But anyway, when I first met Bill, I says, okay, Bill, what are we doing here? And he says, we're down here to work with the farmers, help them along with what they needs. And I says, what about the farmland and stuff like that? He says, I'll tell you right now, we are not farmers. We are here to work with the farmers and handle their needs and stuff that they need. That was the start of it. Well, we had a little bit of the land was worked up, kind of pretty rough shape, working it up. And I says, what are we going to do with the grass out, or the land out there, Bill, as far as working the land? I'll tell you right now, he says, we are not farmers. That quack grass here was here for thousands of years before we come. That quack grass will be there for thousands of years after we're gone. We will use those four-legged harvesters that Brian used to talk about. That's how we market our feed. And that's what he told me years ago. He says, you grow whatever you can on your land and you walk it off the farm. You don't truck it off the farm. So that was the start of it with Bill. And we went on from there, and that Bill, I don't know, there was never a dull moment with that man. He was always, I don't know if he slept at night, to be honest, because he was always thinking of what are we going to get into next. And it went from one thing to another to another. Back in the early 70s, the Alberta government was trying to promote agriculture, so there was a lot of programs available to farming to make it go. Well, there was a program for rebuilding the farms and stuff like that, and Bill got onto that. Pretty soon we had fence posts coming out of the United States, we had plywood coming out of the USA, we had fertilizer coming out. It was just, and Bill was marketing it, buying it, selling it. I remember the fertilizer part, I don't know the whole story, but I know I signed my name one or two times, and we would get $400, and Bill would handle, and Ruby would do the paperwork, and we'd for buying the fertilizer, and then he'd resell it. That was just one thing there. Then we even had pigs on that feedlot, if you can believe that one. Lots of pigs. And and then there was a cow program come in, and farmers could go buy 10 cows. I don't remember the particulars. Bill and the boys were out buying every cow they could get, bring it into the feedlot there. And there was farmers, I kid you not, they were lined up in the driveway in the morning to go pick their 10 cows, so they belonged to this program. And Bill's in his glory, the boys are busy buying cattle and selling. Then, if you believe this one or not, we even got to the machinery end. Bill and his friend, I think I know his name, was it Eulogy, boys? They went to Florida. What's Bill know about machinery? He comes back with round balers, and not the best. But they come home with, I think it was 2 carloads at the Clyde Railway Station. We unloaded them, what was there, 10, 12, 15 round balers. He sold them all. They all come back in time, because none of them were really working. We had better round balers in those days. He tried to get me on one, because I already had my own baler, and I didn't care for it. Anyway, they all come back, and no doubt Bill took them back on trade. No doubt that farmer went away happy. Probably had cattle when he left there for they got the balers back. Then we got buffalo. There was buffalo everywhere. fenced all the land we had with, what is there, 7 or 8 wires on that and posts that high, and we had the buffalo too. And you all heard about that stories. Then one day in about 75, 76, I don't know when that come about, but one morning he says, I think we should build an auction mart. Really? We got that property right across from where I'm at. It was the old drive-in theater at that time. So we built an auction mart, but there's really not much water there. And we tested and we couldn't find water anywhere. How do you run cattle a place without water? So I crossed the road, I got a dugout there, and because I knew it had that too, and I dug a dugout for water. Well, Bill says, well, let's put a line across the road to the auction mart. This auction mart's only going to have a couple hundred head a week, they don't need a whole lot. That was the first week. And you know what happened after that. It just went, you know how it went. And the one other thing he told me one day, he says, all his wheeling deals, and he says, the first profit is the best profit. You take that and you go on to something else, and he did. Now I'm going to go ahead quite a few years, and Bill and Ruby were living down by, is it Chestermere, east of Calgary? I wanted to go down there, and I took my son Barry, and we were going to an auction sale to buy a truck. And I knew Bill lived around there, so I phoned him, Bill and Ruby, and I phoned him, and I says, Bill, we're coming down. I'm going to go try to this auction mart. And he says, well, if you're coming down, you're staying at our place. I says, really? He insisted on it. So Barry and I are on our way down there, and I know Bill, if he's got somebody to talk to and listen to, he'll work with you. I told Barry before we went, I said, Barry, you put your listening cap on, because you're going to get an earful tonight. And this went on and on and on, and next morning as we're leaving, Bill says to Barry, he says, son, I will trade everything I got for one thing you got. Barry perks up, gee, what the heck could that be? And what would that be? He says, your youth. There was nothing Bill would like better to start all over again. Yeah, he's a pretty special, He's a pretty special person in our Nile family. We probably got together most of a month, about once a month, and for the last couple of years or so, he'd stop in. Bill and Brian. And then we had the pleasure here about a month ago. Who shows up with them is Thor. Holy smokes. And every time I got pictures of Bill and us and Brian and whoever and whatever. John too. John's been with us forever. And I didn't take a picture that day. I got halfway to Edmonton, driving to Edmonton. Brian and Bill and the three of them are on their way to Edmonton. And I called him. I says, damn it, Brian. I says, I wanted to get that picture. That would be special to me. We'll do it next month. Thor will be back home in about a month or so. And you know what happened. Just like that, you missed it. I'll tell you one, people, don't miss it. If you got an opportunity, do it now. There's only one thing wrong with this party today. The person that we enjoyed the most is not here. Why didn't we do this 6 months ago? Why? It would have been just as good. We'd had the guest of honor here. Such a special person. Such a special person in our lives, our Nile family lives. I was thinking, this has been taking a while to put this together, like 3 weeks. And I tell you, there isn't a moment in 3 weeks I haven't thought about this. Hard on me, as you can tell. Such a very special person. I think back, and I was the other day, and I'm thinking, did we ever have an argument? Bill and I. I say no. I know I listened to him lots. There was times almost too much, because Bill always was willing to talk and run things by you. I'm across the road on the weekends doing my thing, feeding my cattle, and now Bill's got a break from all his other dealings during the week. And I can see him out there driving on the road. And I know he's looking for me. And I'm kind of avoiding him. Like, I want to get my chores done. No, pretty soon Bill's right up there with you. And we're running over something he's got planned for the next week. You know, Bill, like I said, you're so special in my life. And Ruby, and the kids, even Sharon, babysat our kids. Yeah, all pretty special. Oh, and I never brought up about Kenny. Where's Kenny at? Right there. Now, if you want some more stories, catch me later. Oh, boy. Anyway, I'm going to close with this. Bill, you're such a very special poet. I miss you very much. Take care. Rest in peace. And if there's any dealings where you're at now, I'm sure you'll be right at the forefront. Take care, Bill.
Thanks, Mel. Well, I think if the videographer is ready, we've got a special video tribute to Bill put together by the family, so sit back and enjoy.
Since the time of Michel Pablo, there have been businessmen across the continent who have both preserved the plains bison and exploited its commercial potential.
Clarkson bought the cow, $43. Clarkson, $43.
Alberta cattleman Bill Neelson is one of these entrepreneurs.
That feed on it, 47 to go here.
Right here, 47 here, 7 1/4. $47 here, sir, 7 1/4, 7 1/4, 47 1/4, sir, 7 here, 7 1/4, what do you say, 7 1/2, 7 1/2, 75, 75, 47, 75, now wait here, 48, grind 48, 47, 75, 48, limit no 8, sir, 48, limit no.
They call me Buffalo Bill, I guess that's it. And I don't mind it.
47, 75, 48, sir.
What? Here's some good cows out of the North Country, 47 and go here.
47 here, 7 1/4, $47.
I'm in the cattle business. That's where I really mainly make my living, and it always has been. And I really appreciate the cattle business. But when it comes down to ranching, that in our country, in our area where there's lots of snow and where you've got to put up a lot of feed and do a lot of work to look after cattle, the buffalo was so simple that long as you have fences to hold them and there's grass underneath the snow or like winter pasturing, you never have to feed them, you never have to water them or anything like that. And in this country where it gets lots of days 30, 40 below, the buffalo just thrive on that. They just out in the middle of the fields and jump and play and have a good time, where your cattle are in the barns backed up with behind the sheds and humped over and cold and pretty hard on them, see. I've had awful good luck working with them. They've been they're good to me. They make me money. To me, they got more brains than all the rest of the animals put together. You can just about talk to them.
Well done, whoever put that together. That was awesome. Awesome. For a one-of-a-kind guy, without a doubt. Couple little things before we wrap it up. There will be a reception following here when we're done. So the family invites you to stay for some lunch and fellowship. And of course, there will be pie and ice cream at lunch. There will be a private family burial will take place at Hazel Bluff Community Center, Westlock. That's a private family one. Any donations can be made to your local 4-H chapter or 4-H Alberta, which meant a lot to Bill, obviously. And that's it. Once again, on behalf of the family, we'd like to thank everyone for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today and share some memories. One last thing, no fights, ladies. The centerpieces on your table, you're more than welcome to take those home with you. So how you decide, I don't know, but that's not my job. I'm just the MC. So once again, thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch and the rest of your day. Thank you.